I think we've already introduced ourselves. No need necessarily to go over that again. With me is Lana, my co-founder for the Neurodiversity Education Academy. And here is what we will be covering today. We will be talking about definition and the importance of executive functioning. And I will mainly be covering a model developed by Russell Barkley. And a good metaphor for yourself working with your executive functioning is to think of it as a ship that you're steering and navigating through the waters of life. So we will use that as a way to check in with how our executive functioning is working for us, both the strengths and the weaknesses that we see, and how we deal with both of those, because of course we can use our strength to help us navigate through certain challenges, and we can also support our own weaknesses so that we can better navigate through life. And at the end, we will be sharing some glows and grows that come out of that little exercise, and potentially coming up with something that we want to pay attention to moving forward. So that's the overview of what we'll be doing today. According to Russell Barkley, executive functioning can be split into two high order factors. So the inhibition, and I think it's probably also the starting of things that should be included here. So your ability to stop and start motor control, speech, thinking, and emotional responses. And on the other hand, metacognition, which is sort of your mental model of the world based on your prior experiences, and the thing that lets you build expectations of the world, and also based on those expectations, create a good strategy for moving through the world. In other words, executive functioning is the ability to stop and start specific, well-chosen actions based on a well-rounded understanding of both the past, the present, and our future context, both internally within ourselves and externally. So I'm curious how you would rate your own capacity to manage your executive functioning throughout a day. And you can unmute yourself and share in voice, or you can put something in the chat, but I'd be curious to hear how you rate this. Most people are sharing scores of around a 7 or 5. People seem to be generally happy with their executive functioning. I would say mine is still very much up and down. So on a given day, I can vary between a 4 and an 8. And it's really, really important for me to sleep well, to make sure that I move enough, to make sure that I eat regularly and that I eat healthy things, because that really, really impacts my executive functioning a lot. So building on this, I'm curious to see if we can find a pattern. When is your executive functioning worse? When is your executive functioning better? And let's start with, when is it better? And could also be a function in your context. It could be something that's under your control, but let's think of when your executive functioning tends to be high. And again, you can unmute yourself to share something, or you can put your answer in the chat. That's all fine.
Saskia, we can also do the breakouts.
Okay.
So for both questions on the high and then the low.
And the low. Yep. Did you have breakouts set up, or do you want to set them up now?
I'm doing it now. So let me just. So I'll be putting you in pairs so you can meet with someone new and be able to just share about these two prompts, of think of a time when you experience high executive functioning, and then think of a time when you've experienced low executive functioning. So where was that? And use this as a space of just reflecting back on each other. So you'll have about 3 minutes each person to share. And I'm gonna be putting you now in rooms. I stop recording.
Anna can start our recording. There we go. So first I wanted to talk to you about the executive functioning model of Russell Barkley. I think he's done a lot of amazing work on ADHD and how it's linked to executive functioning. And some people really don't like his message because he can be quite direct about the challenges that come with ADHD. But I think the interesting thing about his model is actually that it gives a lot of room for neural flexibility. And actually, if you know how these executive functions work and how they develop, you can actually support yourself to develop them even more, even later in life. So ADHD is generally known to be associated with some developmental delay. So we also, in kids, see a delay in these executive functionings coming into play as kids age and become more and more independent. So he sees this as something that is increasingly internalized, but it starts as outwardly directed action. So all of the executive functioning start with speaking out loud, stopping other people, being stopped by parents, and then turn into something of a self-directed action where you stop yourself before your parent stops you. You talk to yourself the way your parent talks to you, whether it's in an encouraging way or in a scolding way. You internalize the sort of talk that people use with you as a child to direct your own actions. And that turns into something that at some point starts to become entirely internalized, and you don't see or notice this anymore. A lot of people still can hear their internal monologues, but a lot of people also become unaware of them. So it becomes something that happens completely in the background. And this type of self-regulation sort of develops from the level 1 skills and then helps to build the level 2 skills that are notified here. So it starts with being able to direct your attention to things, being aware of ourselves and what exactly we are doing, how we are doing things, being able to stop and start ourselves, talking to ourselves. And like I said, that's something that eventually becomes an internalized voice, but it starts with kids usually out loud parenting themselves the way that their parents would parent them. So if their parents are prone to saying, "Go on, you can do this," a kid might say that to themselves while they're solving a challenging puzzle. And there's a self-directed sensing. So the starting to think a little bit ahead. What happened last time I played on this little swing? Did I fall off? Then I'll probably be more aware of the fact that I need to be balancing. And that builds into the level 2 skills of self-directed emotions. So maybe using that self-speech, helping yourself to dare to step on that swing, even if you might fall off. So generating some positive expectations and some positive emotion, tapping into why you would want to be on the swing and should not be afraid of falling off. That connects very strongly to our self-directed motivations as well. We see in older kids that they start to realize, I might not want to do this task at the moment. I might not want to do my chore, but I do want to make my mother happy for the fact that I've put the garbage in the bin. So I'll actually do it because the long-term outcome is better for me. And that also becomes self-directed play and creativity, problem solving. A lot of social skills build on self-directed play, and kids need a lot of playtime to develop those social skills as well. And then that model is like very science-based and very much about how we observe kids. But if we want to observe ourselves, these executive functioning as defined in daily life activities that Russell Barkley used, I really like. Self-restraint and self-starting, time management, which is a big challenge for a lot of people with ADHD, self-organization and problem solving, self-motivation, and emotional self-regulation. So as a lot of you have pointed out in introducing yourselves, executive functioning really help us navigate through life and successfully achieve our goals and values. And if you have good executive functioning skills, that tends to contribute to more success experiences. And so it's strongly correlated with having confidence and having a lot of skills. So I'm curious to hear from you so far if any thoughts or feelings are coming up. If you have any insights from this so far, or if you'd like to share something about your experiences. And Lana, I'm not sure if you restarted the recording. Should we? Yep.
So this is an interesting conversation around the having that voices from adults, and what you've shared, Saskia, around having a brain board and who are the other adults that we can have in terms of listening to that voices in our head. What is fascinating enough is I've trained as a facilitator for Hope. So I've shared the link in the chat, and there has been studies already around this in terms of how just having at least two other significant adults or significant relationships in life fosters already positive experiences that builds resilience. And this study is although of course this is framing it right within the American experiences, because the studies are mostly within the US, but it's framing it in terms of how trauma is also seen, right? There's quite a lot of work around ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, but the work around hope in terms of how we can have healthy outcomes from positive experiences really points out to having this voices as in the form of adults in our lives that that can help us to reformulate, or help us reorient ourselves in these situations.
Yeah. And that's so important, especially if we're talking about neuroplasticity, to realize that even as adults, we can create more positive experiences for ourselves. So if I look at my clients, the people that I coach, because they struggle with their executive functioning and their ADHD commonly, but sometimes also other neurodivergencies, what frequently is the case is that they have a lifetime experience of failing at society's expectations. And sometimes they have had a supportive home environment, sometimes they haven't, but they generally have had way more negative feedback about their ability to succeed and how they approach doing things. So sometimes they do succeed, they get the stuff done, but they don't get it done in a way that people around them expect to do it, so that they get lots of negative comments about how they do things, even if they successfully do things. And finding a way to reparent that is really, really important, because expecting all that negative feedback makes it harder to start things. For instance, for me, financial paperwork is always a huge thing. And I sort of have built up a huge pattern of resistance around that, but I was also able to break that down a lot more by doing it in tiny bursts, doing really little things, putting up a structure around doing those things that was as supportive as possible. So really figuring out, what do I need to be successful at this? and intermittently making sure I get lots of positive feedback on doing that tiny piece. Whether it's calling a friend or my sister and having them high five and cheer me on, or actively high-fiving myself in the mirror, whatever, but I need to be generating that positive feedback, because I think if we're thinking about the brain basis for this, and we're doing this for Brain Awareness Week, so I like to at least create a few ties back to that, is that dumps a lot of neurotransmitters in our brain that actually help our brain create and strengthen new paths. So create and strengthen new habits, create and strengthen new ways of responding to a situation, and keep that connection to the prefrontal cortex strong so it stays online. And even if we're emotional, if we're stressed, it can help us problem solve and be resilient. So I'll be moving on to the metaphor of your executive functioning as if you are steering a ship. And I'll just quickly take you through the different items in this metaphor and the executive functioning things that they stand for. And then we're going to go exploring where your areas of strength and weakness usually are. So first of all, the anchor stands for stopping yourself with unhelpful behaviors or responses, sticking to and taking action on an intention or a planned action, even if your environment is sort of pulling at the boat. So even if currents are trying to unmoor the boat or pull it off course, sticking to your guns, as it were. The MAP stands for your working memory, and this is something that a lot of my clients struggle with. Working memory is quite complex. It's also covers all of your senses. So you have visual working memory, you have verbal working memory, but you also have memory for all of your other senses. And this helps you sort of build a map of expectations into the future based on your map of expectations in the past as well. So if your working memory is impaired, it's much harder to learn from your life experiences, and you might need to more actively make time for reflecting and unpacking your experiences based on what you can still remember. And you might want to focus on making sure that while you're doing complicated stuff, your working memory does not get overloaded. Your complex stands for your planning and organization skills, planning for success, gauging if you're still on course or if you need to redirect, overseeing the execution of a plan and intention, and as I said, the need to readjust relative based on the feedback that you're getting. The helm, did I skip one? Yeah, I skipped two even. So the propeller stands for your task initiation, the ability to initiate task or behavior that's both timely and appropriate, and to work on what matters most now. This is definitely an issue for a lot of my clients where they have a lot of trouble prioritizing. So while they are doing things that are important to them, 10 other tasks might pop up into their brain, and very often there's almost an immediate impulse to go do that now. And that's also tied to working memory being hard, because they're afraid that if they won't go and do it now, they'll forget. So building a structure where you can park tasks and come back to that parking spot and reassess what's urgent now, what do I need to move on to after I finish this task, is really, really important. The gauge stands for emotional regulation, where red would be the engine is way too revved up, there's possible damage. Green is you're probably too slow or underfocused, perhaps a little bit understimulated as well. So you're at risk of disengaging, but you could also be there because you're trying to protect yourself. And so the question is, how do we keep the engine running smoothly and re-regulate our emotions, process our emotions, so that we can spend quite a bit of time in an engaged, emotionally balanced and focused state. I don't expect everybody to be there all the time. That's super unrealistic, but we want to spend a reasonable time of our day there. The helm is about this flexibility. So openness to feedback, incoming context signals, incoming internal signals, and then being able to plan and change course during your activities as needed. And finally, the captain's hat stands for the metacognition. So what we often connect to the prefrontal cortex, the ability to weave together these complex bits of information in the moment, filter them to sort of prioritize what's important here or not, and then making executive decisions to change or persist based on the combined set of signals. It's also the ability to sort of stop and reach out to your teammates and go, hey, I'm noticing this is not quite going as expected. What should we do? And collaborate to make a decision. So that's just very much about point of performance problem solving. It's also an issue that's frequently signaled as being an issue with ADHD. And I always like to use the executive functioning model from Berkeley to then say that, okay, that what we need to do is probably to have a lot more reflection time on if you were able to go back to that situation now, what would you do instead? Because that helps us build the map, and the map is really important for the metacognition function. So Lana, I'm not sure if you had a Jamboard or something prepared for this. I think so. Oh, you've put it in the chat already. So to tell us about what's an area of relative executive functioning strength for you, and to tell us a little bit about why maybe you would like to click on the link that Lana has put in the chat and go to the Jamboard so we can gather all of our input there.
So in the Jamboard, it's once you click on the link, it would take you to what's this, a page, and on the left side you have the sticky notes, and if you just take in a sticky note, and yeah, if you don't have to put your name, you can put your initials, but you can just indicate, you know, what is a relative strength for you, and then just some notes. Yeah, this is.
Yeah, the follow-up question is really, how do you make use of that strength? If this is an area of strength for you, how are you already using that to reach your goals, live by your values, in short, make your life a little bit better?
Yeah, and then as you can see, I've added mine there, which is around planning and organizing. So feel free to add yours in.
Lana, would you want me to share the Jamboard instead of the presentation for now?
Yes, that will be great. Then that's easier for everyone to also start seeing.
Put mine in there too.
Yeah, I'm just gonna the TX thing of, is there a way we can see the descriptions on the areas again? My short-term memory is so short, I can't remember the first one that you mentioned. So and I think particularly because our negativity bias, I was more habituated to noticing the areas that I'm weak in rather than being pre-warned to go, is this something that you're strong at?
Mm-hmm.
So I could answer, I can tell you now, again, short working memory, really good, but not as good as I'd like it to be. But I'm struggling to remember them all enough for me to compare and go, where is a strength of mine?
Yeah. So again, I can go through them and cover them really quickly for you. Inhibition is about stopping and starting behavior. And the map is about your working memory. So both your visual and your verbal working memory, but also your sensory memory in general. Envisioning potential outcomes and desires that you might have. The compass is about planning and organizing, gauging if you're still on course, overseeing the execution of a plan or an intention, and sort of signaling the need to readjust, not quite doing it yet. That's the helm, that's flexibility. The propeller is about task initiation, being able to initiate behaviors or tasks timely and appropriately, and working on what matters most right now. The gauge stands for your emotional regulation and how that's balanced over throughout the day. And the captain's hat stands for the metacognition, the creative problem solving, making executive decisions, and being able to communicate with internal and external partners to decide, given a lot of input about how things are going. The recording, I can repeat the question. So the second Jamboard is about figuring out what's an area of relative executive functioning weakness for you. And then if you want to put something on the post-it, please share something about how you tend to complement or support for this area of weakness. How do you support yourself in that area? Or how do you maybe lean on support from other people? That's also an option. We share.
Saskia, just parking in also what you've shared about body doubling and how to use FocusMate as a
Yes.
resource. So we'll also be adding that in the chat.
Yes, FocusMate is a wonderful site, but there are some other options out there as well. So I think if you just Google body doubling, you might be able to find several different options for working together with people from all over the world to get stuff done. Virtual body doubling, it takes a little bit of getting used to. It's not quite the same as body doubling in person. And when you're body doubling in person, knowing about emotional regulation tends to be very, very important. I really had to explain to some people that I like to do this with that it's important to me that they do something that's relaxing and interesting to them while they sit with me to do stuff, especially if I'm doing something that's highly emotionally dysregulating for me, like needing to do my financial paperwork. Because it helps me co-regulate. To have them in the space, I can sort of tap into the calmness of their nervous system, and that helps me tell myself, okay, I'm not actually in danger, nothing bad is going to happen. Yes, I'm doing something difficult, but it'll all be fine. So if they start to do a task that's also stressful for them, that type of body doubling won't be helpful for me. So I think we should probably go back to our regular presentation. Lana, I'll stop sharing the current. If anybody in the meantime, while I make this shift, would still want to share something about their insights with this, then maybe Lana can pause the recording. This is meant to help you create a takeaway from this session. So in going through these areas of executive functioning and exploring them for yourself, figuring out what's an area of weakness, what's an area of strength, and how do you work with those areas? What insight did you gain from this? And how do you feel about that? And moving forward, is there anything you want to keep in mind or take action on? And again, Lana has created the option to do this on the Jamboard. So I will share that now.
I've shared the one pager of the what's this? The different icons with the descriptions that Saskia has shared. Like what I mentioned, there would still be the recording. And if you go to neurodiversityeducationacademy.org, you would find the recordings would be in, and I'm just going there, in courses. So let me share my screen. I think, can I, that one? Share my screen. So you would find it here. So this one was the last one from last month around interoception. So if you click join, and you would be asked to put in your information, then you can have access not just to the recordings, but also to additional links, and the slides would also, we would also be adding in there. So feel free to look at this next week. That will be my first first thing that I would be adding for next week. And also the image that I've shared in the chat with all of the icons and the descriptions would also be shared there. And Saskia, yes, we do have planned sessions. We have one next month, which I would be hosting, and that would be around, and it's also in the let me just give you the link to the event now. And we'll be talking about post-traumatic growth. And this is in the chat. So for those who would like to join us, it will be on our regular timing. So this one was a bit longer, an hour and a half. But on understanding post-traumatic growth, we'll do the 1 hour session. Because we knew that with this executive functioning, we just needed more time to have some time for that. And Saskia, I'll leave you so that you can share the resources.
Yes. I'm just going to put in the chat the video resources, and you can also, of course, go to the place that Lana just mentioned. Once we have stuff up there, you will be able to have a look at the slides and the resources. I just, to copy the video link, stopped the presentation, so I have to restart it again. If you give me a second. I'm fumbling about here, excuse me. What's going on? I can't find the right screen. There we go. These are some of the resources that I used to create the presentation. Russell Barkley's book is on the left. There's amazing stuff written by Peg Dawson and Richard Guara. And what I love about their books is that they've created executive functioning support for all age groups. So there's a book for kids, there's a book tailored to teens, there's also a book tailored to adults, which I think is something a lot of neurodivergents, especially late diagnosed people, are always complaining about. Like, there's so many resources out there tailored to kids, but how do I do this if I'm already a fully functioning adult? There's a wonderful book by Thomas E. Brown. The website where I found the boat model is listed. There's an executive functioning test that you can take if you are interested in finding out if you are struggling with executive functioning issues and where your key areas might be. And on the left, there are lots of podcasts and videos, some from Jessica McCabe at How to ADHD. And the Russell Barkley videos can be a little bit overwhelming. He shares a ton of information in most of his presentations, so I've made it a habit to rewatch some of his stuff like multiple times in order to get all the details. And sometimes it can feel really overwhelming, or you can become a bit desperate, like, will I ever be able to do stuff if I'm suffering from all of this? But he also gives really clear ways to support these executive functioning if they're an issue for you. So he's really realistic, and sometimes that can feel a bit harsh, but he's also really great at figuring out like what's actually going on here, and so how could you support this executive functioning if it's not working too well for you. So with that, I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover today. I'll stop sharing again, and maybe we can say goodbye to each other, and I hope to see you in a future session. It was a wonderful group to interact with today.
Thank you, Saskia.